Hey everybody, Mr. Holmes here. Hey, I wanted to get the next chapter started with you, and so this one is going to be a pretty big one, and it's going to cover insect behavior. And we have to break this into like four different chunks. It's a pretty huge chapter and everything, but I think you'll really enjoy it. And while we're going through this, I want you to also think of similarities in behavior that you may observe with fellow human beings, or maybe you see it with your cat or your dog or your hamster or your goldfish. Any animal that you're observing, you may find some interesting behavior there. And so what I'm going to be teaching you about is not restricted to just insects. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. If you could just maybe take some quick notes while we're doing this, that would be fabulous. Appreciate it. So to start this one off, what I would like to do is have you just think of behavior. Regardless of the behavior, what behavior is an action or a reaction to some stimulus coming in from the environment. It could be a smell or a taste. It's something that you see or you're hearing. So it's all of your senses, and it's something out in the world that is sending information or that the animal picks up. Inappropriate responses, of course, could be pretty negative. That could obviously result in injury or death. So, someone's dorking around doing parkour off the roof and, land in the garbage can, and, maybe that hurts, right? Inability to mate. There are many animals that have mate selection and competition, and so if you don't have the right call, that might not attract a mate or whatever. Lowered food intake and increased water loss. Let's say you go hiking in the desert and you're like, nah, I don't need to bring water with me. That could be a problem. That is the wrong behavior for walking out in the middle of the desert. In these pictures here, yeah, that first pile there on the left, that's a dead moth. For whatever reason, it got stepped on or whatever, and that's a scanning electron micrograph. Super zoomed up. But then the picture on the right, look at the bird with the caterpillar. That caterpillar might have been showing us its most amazing dance moves. And unbeknownst to us, the bluebird, using its eyes, saw, ooh, protein wiggling around. I'm going to go ahead and kill that and eat it. And so that caterpillar showing us its amazing dance moves tragically did not even allow it to get to adulthood. Instead, it became eaten by the bird. So anyway, that's something to think about. So moving along, I wanted to introduce you to a couple of words about movement. And yes, insect movements, but this can actually be applied to any animal. So I don't care if it's snakes or humans or giraffes or what. So kinesis are just general, sort of non-directional, just you jump and it's a random movement. So kinesis are not focused, they're not planned, they're just like, I'm moving, and that's it. And there's no plan other than movement and getting to some other place. Taxis, for example, like a chemotaxis. Chemo means chemicals. Taxis is a type of movement. Those are directed toward something or away from something. So if you're walking down the street and then all of a sudden you smell, donut smell coming from a grocery store, you might use your nostrils and go like, oh, dude, I gotta find that donut, and walk toward it. Okay. Or, if your cat just threw up in the kitchen, you might walk away from it because it smells gross, and that would be a chemotaxis. There are other things like phototaxis. Some insects run away when they see the light, and they scurry under fence boards and furniture and things like that. Or other insects are attracted to the light. So that would be a phototaxis. So anyway, there are directed movements toward or away from the stimulus, whatever the smell, the light, the taste, the sound. If you've ever heard a loud sound, you might cower and run away from it, and head the opposite direction. So anyway, so those are insect movements. Okay, this slide right here is going to explain a lot in life. It's going to explain why you have two nostrils, two eyes, two ears, two hands, 2 feet, and you are symmetrical. If you could imagine a middle line running right down the middle of your body, you have a left side and a right side. And this is extremely important in terms of understanding where stuff is around you. And so if you were to close your eyes and maybe out of your left nostril you're smelling some delicious dinner or something, or whatever, your favorite food, right? And it's coming into your left nostril stronger than it's coming into your right nostril. That means that it'll be on your left side. And if your eyes were closed and you were sniffing around and you wound up orienting your body to where you could smell equal amounts of delicious dinner smell coming in your left or right, left and right nostrils, that would mean it's either directly in front of you or directly behind you. And you can orient to figure out where that big strong smell is coming from. Similarly with your ears, if you hear something louder on your right side than your left side, it's whatever's making that sound is on the right. And if you love music and you want to hear like every note and instrument and just soak it all in, you wind up putting on earbuds or headphones. That's what we used to listen to in the 70s, or whatever. You'd put on those headphones or earbuds, and you would have equal amounts of that volume coming into your ears, and you would just totally soak in that music. And so because you are symmetrical and you've got left half and right half when it comes down to your senses, you can actually pick out what direction that stuff is coming from. So what's kind of weird, and of course if we were in person, this was a pretty cool experiment to do, is I would have my students in the classroom and I'd have them close their eyes and just keep their heads facing forward. And what I would do is I'd wander around the classroom reading them some stuff out of some book or whatever, and with all the lights off and with their eyes closed, they would be hearing me. And then I would have, once I was done doing that and I'd turn on the lights again, have them open their eyes, I'd say, hey, what was my path? Which way did I walk around the classroom and stuff? And they would all be able to point, okay, you walked here and you walked there and you went around the classroom and stuff. So I'm sorry we're not able to do that this year, but whatever. Well, fingers crossed. Okay, this is like the matrix of learning because you're learning how learning happens now. So the main thing with learning, it's got a couple of requirements for actual learning to happen. Okay, first of all, some unpredictable relationship where you can't possibly know the outcome between a stimulus and a response. You've got to, so you're going into it blind, right? And it's like, I've never experienced this before and all that stuff, and whatever it is. And then you've got to be able to sense cues and pull information in from the outside world. It's got to go into your nervous system, into your brain. And then here's where the actual memory is happening, is you've got to be able to retrieve that and bring it back up again, okay? And that's the actual learning part. If you just relay it to the nervous system, if you do all three of these first three things, but you can't retrieve it at a later date, you haven't learned it, right? So Yeah, and I know school's all about like earning points and accumulating points and learning and memorizing and everything else. But there are other things in your life, so many other things in your life that you have learned and that you can remember that have nothing to do with school, right? The nervous system center, the relaying, is the processing part. And if you guys remember, insects have their brains kind of spread throughout their body in little nuggets. They're called ganglia. So they're not super duper smart. They don't have like super long-term memory, and I'll come to that in another slide here real quick. You as a human being, you have like gazillions of neurons in your brain, and that is actually where you're able to process a lot of memory and a lot of learning. And as you go throughout your life, you're going to be pulling in more information and learning new stuff about life, and it's a pretty cool thing. Basically, though, the main thing is if there's actually any like permanent writing, like saving it to a hard drive or whatever in your brain, you have to be able to retrieve it later on in life, and that's technically what learning requires. So here's something that's kind of bizarre I wanted to talk to you about, is habituation. Habituation. This is a decrease in the response to a repeated stimulus. You hear it over again, or you see it over and over again, and you finally are numb to it, and your brain goes, forget it, I don't need to hear it. Now, you don't need to write down this second bullet point here. This is just a general question to you, is before you saw this slide, were you all day aware of your socks? Like you were trying to get through school, getting through stuff, and you're just like, yeah, I'm still wearing socks, all right, and you get through another class period and you're like, these socks are awesome, I just love these socks, I feel them 100% of the time around my foot. Chances are no. Chances are, you felt your socks going on this morning, and then after a while your brain's like, all right, I don't need to worry about that anymore. I know I've got socks, so forget it. Let's move on to something else. And so that's habituation. An example of that might be if you live near an airport, you don't hear airplanes after a while. Your brain is like, all right, forget it. Who cares? I know it, whatever. And then you just like blank it out of your system. So any animal is capable of habituation, where your brain, you don't need that information coming in constantly. So maybe after I just started talking about socks, you might have been like, oh yeah, I'm wearing socks and all that good stuff. But, maybe before that you had totally forgotten it. Maybe even a couple of minutes after putting your socks and shoes on today. So anyway, that's habituation. It's just kind of numbing stuff out that you don't need to know anymore and don't need to process anymore. Okie doke. So I want to go into a couple of different types of learning, different levels of learning, and the most basic here is associative learning. There's an association between some stimulus and some reward. So if you are hearing the ice cream truck music coming down the street in the middle of August, and all of a sudden you hear that music and you want to go run and find $2 so you can get some cool ice cream, right? You've got that reward there. You know that little ice cream truck music is going to get you something. Or for any of you who have pets, the sound of the can opener or the crinkling of a paper food bag or whatever gets them flying at you as fast as they can, because they know that once that can opener opens or that bag moves and makes noise, food is going to get dumped at them. And so that is associative learning. It's just a super basic kind of thing. And there's, that reward kind of keeps that reinforcement going, that the can opener means food. Okay. Latent learning is kind of a trip because latent means hidden. And there's no reward that's obvious. It's kind of like observational learning. So you could learn from witnessing something else. So, for example, you see fail videos and people, punching garbage cans or doing weird stuff and getting injured. You don't have to get injured yourself. Just observing that, ooh, wow, that person, fell down on their ski or whatever in the snow and bonked into a tree or something like that. And that is retained for later so that you later on know that you're not going to come flying off the second floor of a building into a garbage can for fun, because that hurts, right? And if you see video of somebody, wiping out on snow skis or whatever, maybe if you ski or something, I've never skied before, but you'll avoid trees because you observed this with somebody else. So there actually isn't a physical reinforcement or motivation or association with latent learning. You just observe, and you just file it into your head for later on. This is also how mazes are solved. Now, insight is like the deepest one, where you can actually make predictions, and you need some serious brain power to have insight. And so you could be problem solving, and it's something you've never even seen before or heard before, and it's kind of experimental, and so you've got a new response or some reasoning or something to solve problems. You're working around some other direction that is totally unrelated. So maybe you learned something in like geometry class or something, but then later on you might be trying to build something at home, and you're like, gosh, I gotta algebra my way through this. That kind of insight is how that type of learning works. Okay, there are a couple of rhythms that I wanted to talk about, and exogenous versus endogenous rhythms, and gen, Gen, in here, to generate, that means to start. So exogenous rhythms are just patterns in behavior that are generated from outside of like the insect, and it seems to be tied more to like changes in the seasons. So if you remember that Mono Lake assignment from way back when, the female stopped laying eggs when the amount of daylight and the temperatures dropped and reduced enough. And so that told their bodies that, oops, guess what? If I lay any eggs, those kids are going to be either freezing or they're going to be starving because there's less photosynthesis. And so they just stop. And then with the coming of the spring is when their bodies and behaviors change, and then those flies start reproducing again. Endogenous, endo means inside. So this is sort of an internal clock that's going on. This would be, for example, with you, this is your sort of light, dark, active, and rest biological patterns throughout the day. There are also what they call circumlunar, which means it goes around like the moon's cycle and everything else. So these are more rhythms that are patterned within the body, as opposed to stuff that's patterned outside of the body. So what's interesting with feeding is there a certain like a minimum amount of like triggers need to be like triggered in order for feeding to start. And so the arrows in this picture, I'm pointing at this grasshopper here that has, this has chemoreceptors around the mouth. So the palps, I've mentioned them as mouth fingers. The tarsi, the little foot nuggets, those have chemoreceptors and they can taste. And the antennae also have chemoreceptors and they can taste. And so when an animal lands on something, and it picks it up like, okay, yeah, feet are picking this up, the mouth is picking this up, antennae, yep, check, check, check. Okay, sounds cool. This looks pretty good. Let's start eating. There has to be a determination on whether to actually feed or not feed, because that's going to require resources and calories and everything to actually do the eating and the digesting and everything else. So if you are let's say we have a fly, okay? Let's pretend you're a fly and you're like, all right, cool. I just found this roadkill squirrel or this steaming pile of dog poop in the park or what. Oh, this is going to be great. Going to eat, going to lay some eggs here or whatever. Get all excited. So what happens is when those flies land on their food, they have to taste it and distinguish and go and you have the chemoreceptors. They're going to also sense moisture content and find out if it's the right substrate to actually wind up feeding. If it is not the right substrate or if it's not the right chemical conditions, let's say it lands on a roadkill squirrel that's like super dry and it's like cardboard out in the street, it's not going to eat. It's not even going to start going, ooh, delicious, because it won't fit the right criteria for food that's worth eating. And later on, you'll learn actually that the ovipositor, the tube that's used for laying eggs, also has chemoreceptors on it, and insects are able to, when they're laying eggs, they're able to figure out, is this the right moisture content? So if you wind up, let's say you're one of those little green bottle flies, the big metallic green ones, you land on some poop, but it is dehydrated in the sun, and, and that ovipositor is going to go, okay, I'm on poop, but it's too dry. My kids are not going to survive this one, so it's not going to lay the eggs there. Same thing with food. So you got to hit those criteria, that checklist, biologically, like chemically, like, oh, is this the right stuff? And then the feeding behavior is actually going to commence. Okay, the final slide. Thanks for hanging in there. Sorry this is taking so long. So anyway, insects are actually clean freaks. They require clean bodies to survive. And if you had a bug of some sort that had horrible hygiene skills and it's like, I don't care, or whatever, it may not be able to sense the world. And therefore, it may not have the correct behavior when it comes down to eating or fleeing predators or laying eggs or attracting a mate or whatever. And so these two pictures, you got a praying mantis and an ant. The praying mantis is cleaning its foot. The ant is cleaning its antennae. Both of those have chemoreceptors, so they can sense. They're actually tasting with their feet. And if you could imagine, sorry to keep going to dog poop on this one, but if you could imagine a fly that has... maybe it's just got really bad hygiene and it's like, I don't care, I'm not motivated or whatever. And if it has dried poop on its chemoreceptors, it could land on the grossest, freshest dog poop ever. But if its chemoreceptors are clogged because it's got dried poop stuck between its toes and all that stuff, it's not going to actually taste the food. It could be sitting on a mountain of food and it's looking around going like, man, I sure am hungry. I can't find any food. Boy, I should really wash my toes, or whatever. So, yeah. So insects, I don't care if it's like a cockroach that everybody goes, ew, gross. They are actually neat freaks and clean freaks because it's their survival. So, yeah, I wouldn't, lick the next... cockroach that I see walking down the sidewalk or anything like that, but generally they are clean freaks. So anyway, that's sort of our first part of chapter 6. So hopefully I didn't drag on too long, you guys. But anyway, enjoy. I'll get you the assignment information in Canvas as well.